And over the course of the past decade, I've talked to thousands of customers. So I've seen almost every imaginable use case of Promatrix. So with thousands of customers worldwide, we have customers using Promatrix in many different ways. And so I want you to also understand that it's a really personal thing. And so when I think about Promatrix, I think of it as being core to your workflow, whether it's an individual, a team, or across the entire organization. So let's go through the Protomatrix checklist. If you're brand new to Protomatrix, this is how I think about the timeline in terms of being able to take advantage of our system. The first is that today, what you want to be able to do is you want to make sure that you install Protomatrix on all the platforms and then create your first personal and team project and then start reviewing what's important and urgent. And again, I'll walk you through each of these steps as well. Over the course of the next week or so, one of the things I want you to do is start reviewing your priorities with team members. Now, what happens is that our tasks, the things we have to do not exist in a silo, right? When you think about the work that you have to do, it impacts so many other people. And in some ways, it cascades to across the entire team or organization as well. But by day 5, then you're already seeing the tasks that you have, and then you can go and communicate those tasks and show your priorities to others. Then you can start reprioritizing them and then making sure that you check in with your manager to ensure alignment. One of the things that we don't do enough, in my opinion, is that we don't go and make our priorities explicit, right? How many times have you talked to your coworker and then you talk about something that's important and then suddenly you realize that you didn't know that it was important, or they didn't know it was important? And that's because we all have sort of these priorities within our brain and in our mind, and we're like, no, this is so obvious. Everyone should know this. But the reality is that's not the case. And so with Protomatrix, we make it explicit, and therefore I encourage you that once you have the explicit Protomatrix written down, go check in with your manager, go check in with your coworkers, go check in with your clients to ensure you're all on the same page. Then over the course of a month or so, you're finally reprioritizing your team and organization goals. Then you're creating a habit of prioritizing your tasks and emails. And then the most important aspect of all of this is eliminate the time waster, right? And so for me, I have so many things I could do. The most important thing I can do personally is deciding where to focus my time and then where to not focus my time. There are plenty of things I have to say no to, plenty of meetings I have to decline. Uh, and that's the only way to ensure that I focus my time on what really matters. And I hope you do the same. And I hope that Protomatrix will sort of help surface up those important tasks. So what is Protomatrix? Protomatrix is a comprehensive email priority and project management software that helps at 3 different levels. At the individual level, it helps you prioritize your tasks and emails. And to me, that's the most important thing. I hope that every single one of you are able to go and start prioritizing your tasks and emails and just get better control on what it is that you're doing, what it is you should be doing, and then focusing on those critical action items. What happens though is that as you use Protomatrix and you're prioritizing your task, then you go and you share that information with your coworkers. It actually helps everyone be aligned and get to the same page. And that is all around being explicit with our priorities. So then when you walk around the office, actually the visualization I encourage people to think about is that imagine if you walk around the office and your priorities are right there floating above your head, and everyone can look at it and start realizing, wait a minute, we're aligned, that's great, or wait a minute, we're misaligned, let's talk about that. And then lastly, as you use Protomatrix more, we actually help your organization create a single source of truth to help you become more efficient and effective. And really, it boils down to retaining the information, keeping a record of the priorities, and then allowing people to actually redelegate tasks or reassign tasks, and yet help everyone else understand all the decisions that's ever been made around prioritizing a previous task. And again, I'll walk you through these in more concrete example as we walk through the product demo. Let's start with a fundamental concept behind Protomatrix. There's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." Now, what I really like about this quote is that it helps us understand that things are actually not single dimensional. In fact, if you think about the work that you have to do, you can think it from two dimensions. Is that task important, and is that task urgent, right? So if I were to ask you to write down the 15 things you have to do right now, go ahead and take out a piece of paper, start writing those 15 things down. And then I ask you, so what do you work on? How do you decide? Do you start at the top of the list or the bottom of the list or somewhere random in the middle, right? Top of the list means it's the first thing that comes to our mind. And so what happens is that people tend to make those mistakes where they choose tasks that are top of mind over tasks that are important. And the problem is the tasks that are top of mind tend to be the urgent things, not the important things. And that's what this quote is really about. As an example, when you checked your email this morning, what email did you look at first? Is typically it's the top one. It's the one at the very top. Why? It's because it's that last email in. And then not only that, when you respond, you tend to think about the emails that you've been sent over and over again. And that is why sales emails are so effective, right? Because those salespeople will keep on sending you emails over and over again. And guess what? It stays top of mind for you. So whether or not that email is important doesn't matter. It's urgent and it's top of mind. So this is something I want you to think about. And this is the fundamental concept behind Party Matrix and behind prioritizing your task, which is to make sure that we ask these questions in the work that we do. So if you take those 15 tasks and you start asking that question, is this important and is this urgent? The things that are important and urgent goes in quadrant 1. That's your high priority task. Those are the things you should always be working on at any point in time. Then the things that are important but not urgent, they're in quadrant 2, which is the medium priority. And then the things that are urgent but not important, that's low priority. And then instead of having anything that's not important, not urgent, you just have a quadrant 4, which is where you put your task to categorize. If it's not important, not urgent, perhaps you should get rid of it completely. And that's as simple as that in terms of prioritizing your task. Instead of having that one long list, you put it into this Eisenhower matrix. Now, the magic of this is that it forces us to prioritize tasks from the very beginning. Right? So let me give you some example. When I have a list of things to do, if I just write down the list, I kind of get overwhelmed. It's like, okay, there's just too many things right now. Where do I really focus my time? And so by actually putting into these different quadrants, I can start thinking about, okay, I need to focus on quadrant 1 first. Or if there's something that I'm working on, but it's on quadrant 1, then maybe I should reprioritize it instead. So it forces me to make these decisions and being very conscious of it. But the most important aspect of Protomatrix is being able to take this and share it with others. That the reason is very simple, is that again, all these priorities, they're not in silo, right? You have them in the back of your mind and you think these priorities are what they are. But will your coworkers think the same? Will your customers think the same? Will your manager think the same? And that's where Part of Matrix shines, which is being able to go and then taking that 4-quadrant Eisenhower matrix and letting you compare notes with everybody else. And so Part of Matrix actually helps you create alignment because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. And then not only that, success from using Part of Matrix isn't about finding out what everyone agrees on. It's finding disagreement on what should be a priority when it isn't. And so this is actually something that's not very obvious to a lot of people. They think that using Matrix, and then they go and they have a conversation, everyone's aligned, or everything's in quadrant 1, so therefore everyone's on the same page. That's wrong. You don't want that. You actually want to see what are the things you guys have disagreements on. So that's where you focus your time and effort. And again, you need to focus the things on quadrant 1 and quadrant 2, so then you can actually spend your resources correctly. So one of the advice I typically give to customer is that one, when you use Part of Matrix in a team meeting environment, just project it onto the big screen. And when you do that, what happens is that everyone will be able to see the priorities, and suddenly it's very explicit, and it could be wrong, and that's okay, right? And I think that that we I need to emphasize that. Again, having worked with so many customers, and then not only that, we use Matrix internally to manage hundreds of projects, tens of thousands of tasks. So we know a little bit about Matrix and how to prioritize. But these are some takeaways I want to give to you uh, that I want to make sure that you ingrain it into how you use our software. The first is, if everything's important, then nothing is important. And I've talked to so many customers where, it's typically the manager's fault, where the manager goes and said, you know what, this is important and urgent. This is important and urgent. This is important and urgent. Well, then what are we going to work on? We can't decide what is truly important if everything is important. And so if you have all your tasks in quadrant one, that's wrong. I would recommend that no more than 25% of the tasks that you have belongs in quadrant one. So then the second aspect of it is that important tasks should always have due dates, as well as well-defined ownership. And in Matrix, you can actually set due dates, reminders, and recurring due dates, recurring reminders, and then clear owners of every single task. And the reason I bring this up is because I've seen customers where they said, you know what, this task is very important, but there's no due dates associated with it. So suddenly it just sits there and no one's reviewing it. And it's okay to have a wrong due date, but you can change that and so forth. And then also, I see people trying to assign a task to multiple people. Don't do that. Single owners, you can always change that, but I think it's very important to have that person be the decision maker. And then the third part is, don't track everything, track what matters most. When it comes to task management software, Matrix is able to do so much, and you can track almost everything in it. But if you're very new to the system, I don't recommend that. Instead, I want you to focus on those 15, 20 tasks for every single project, and then prioritize those. So then, you're tracking the things where you can actually make decisions on. And then fourth, prioritize your most important emails, not all emails. So today, I'm going to show you how to prioritize those emails. But I've had customers ask me, oh, how do I take all the emails I have and put into Matrix? I don't recommend that. And the reason is simple. It's just you're going to bring an overwhelmed list of emails from one system to another system, and that won't work, right? And so instead, you should think of Matrix as just a way to capture the most important things, so then you know exactly where you should spend your time. And then the fifth aspect is that Matrix is a communication tool. So it's really interesting, when people think about software and task management and project management, you call different software for those purposes. But at the same time, I want to emphasize that Matrix is really a way to make priorities explicit, mostly because of our Eisenhower Matrix and our four quadrants methodology, which is making sure that your priorities are well communicated to everybody else. And again, I emphasize that over and over again because it is so important. And then lastly, this is actually a little bit controversial, but I think it's actually really interesting, is that concrete, clear priorities, even when they're wrong, um, are actually better than invisible assumed priorities. And let me explain that, which is, let's just say after today's webinar, you go back and you decide, I'm not going to use Matrix. I don't want to track anything. Why? We know exactly what we need to work on. Perfect, right? So that right there is what I called assumed priorities, and invisible because it's not explicit. Conversely, you go into Matrix and you say, you know what? I'm going to start writing down my priorities. I don't know if these are the right ones or not, but I'm going to put them down, and then I'm going to start talking to my managers, to my customers, and so forth. And then I'll reprioritize as needed. And to me, the second approach is far more powerful because you get to learn, and then you actually make sure that you take away all those assumptions that you thought you had that could have been wrong. So anyways, I want to share with you these insights because this applies to all of us, and also it applies to everyone who's really trying to tame their time, who's trying to be more productive. I do want to mention that our webinars are on our website, affluence.com/webinars. We also have a couple of other webinars that address other topics. And so if you're interested in that, make sure you check that out in the future. And so with that, let me jump into the software and show you how to put this into practice. Okay, here I have my Protomatrix open. So if you were signing up for a Protomatrix and you use our web application, this is sort of what you see. Now, one thing I want to mention is that works on Mac as a native app, Windows as a native app, inside Microsoft Teams, inside Outlook, and then also as a web application and also on mobile devices. So Protomatrix is pretty much everywhere. And we did that on purpose because, we think it's better to have a hopefully will help you find the things you need to work on no matter what. Now, let me explain the structure of Protomatrix. On the left-hand side, I have my list of projects, right? So for example, I have a project for goals for 2025. I have my personal priorities, maybe I have sales lead, weekly staff meeting, and so forth. So in Protomatrix, you can create as many projects as you want, and every single project has its own 4 quadrants. So as you can see here, when I selected this project, I have 4 quadrants: high priority, medium priority, low priority, and inbox. So let's do an example. I'm going to say follow up with webinar participants. Okay, so this is something that I should do. But one of the things I can do here, and I'm going to say due tomorrow at 2 p.m. And so when I press enter here, Protomatrix create the task for me. But we actually use natural language to process this. And then since you say due tomorrow at 2 p.m., Protomatrix will go ahead and create the task with the due date of 2 p.m. in your local time. And when I select the task, the right-hand side opens, and this is what's called the item details. This is where you can add additional information around the task itself, such as due date, ownership, and so forth. But it's actually really interesting because there are many, many things that you can do with the task. And just like any task management software, you can add a lot of information. You can also add very little information. So what are the things that are truly important? And this is my opinion on what you should do. One, if the task is very important, we should always have those due dates, right? And again, use the natural language to set the due dates because it's the easiest way to do it. Then next to that, you have reminders. And reminders and due dates are actually different in the following ways. The first, actually, let me give you an example. Let's just say if I have something that's due in 1 week, but that task will take me 3 days to work on. Now, if I only set the due date, then the day arrives, then guess what? I'm not able to do all that within that same day. So what I might want to do is I want to set a reminder ahead of time to make sure that I remember to work on this task. But there's a second reason to set reminders and due dates separately. And the reason is what happens is that when you have a task that's due, at first you're thinking about it because you know that that due date is coming up, right? That's in the back of your mind. And so as the due date approaches, you're thinking about the task. But the moment the due date passes, you start thinking about something else and you're going to forget it. So what I like to do is I like to set a recurring reminder to make sure that I go back and answer and address that task. So I would go down here in the chat section, I would say, remind me daily. So now on a daily basis, I'll get a reminder to work on this task. And again, Protomatrix uses natural language, and I can set the reminders or due dates directly in the conversation. Of course, I can also click on the buttons here and also change the due date as needed. Now, in terms of the task, there's a couple of things I can do. I can change owner. So this means I can assign to another person. And this is where that clear ownership comes in. So when you select an owner, you see how their avatar shows up here. You can upload a pictures if you want, or otherwise it takes their initial. And so that shows up right here in the ownership. And so from the perspective of a user, it's very easy for them to come into a quadrant, able to see, okay, what are the things I'm responsible for? Because you see your picture next to it. To the right of that, you have progress and you have effort. And so these are ways for you to actually add additional metadata to the task, such as, this task is 50% done. This task takes 3 hours or 4 hours to work on, etc. Now, if you add additional information to Protomatrix, you can generate reports on it afterwards. So let me give you an example. Let's just say if you have a matrix, and that tracked the task across your team of 10 members. Now, within those team members, you have a bunch of different tasks, and then you have all these different due dates, and then efforts, and so forth. With Matrix, you actually can generate a report on exactly how many hours everyone's responsible for in a given time period, or how many hours they worked on, and so forth. So that information is all tracked, and you can generate reports from that. Down here, you have the chat section. This is where you can actually communicate with your other coworkers on what on the status of tasks, or you can ask people what is it they're working on. So one of the things that's actually very useful here is escalating this information and making sure that people are aware of the tasks that are assigned to them. So for example, I can click on this plus right here, and then I can mention a collaborator. Now I can say, hey, Remy, could you also review this task, right? And so what I've just done is I'm actually surfacing up, or what I'm doing is I'm actually mentioning people to make sure that they're aware that these tasks requires their attention. And so when you think about Matrix, and when you think about the work that you have to do, one of the things that's really important is for anyone to figure out, what should I work on today? And so the way it works in Matrix is actually we have these things on the left-hand side that are called alerts. So you see here, I have something called the home view, and it says there's 34. So when I click on this 34, these are 34 items that requires my attention. But the most important ones are the following. Assignments, these are tasks that were assigned. And then also, if someone mentions me on a task, just like what I mentioned to Remy, it would actually show up here as a tab as well. And then also tasks that were where I was invited to, and then also tasks that are overdue, as well as reminders that triggers. So when I start my day in Matrix, this is where I go to. I go to the home view, I look for new assignments, and I look for new mentions to make sure that I answer my coworkers and tell them the status of the task, or address the tasks that were assigned to me. Inside Matrix, there's also what's called the agenda. So if I click on agenda, it actually tells me all the things that I have to work on. But one thing that's really interesting is Matrix works well as a task for individuals, but it also works well as a software management system for managers. So let me give you an example. Let's say if I'm mostly a coworker, I'm mostly an individual contributor. So what that means is when I go to agenda, I really don't care what other people are working on, right? So in that case, I can go to the top right here and then just choose items I own. In this case, it's telling me all the things I need to work on this week for the tasks that are assigned to me. But in a different scenario, what if I was a manager and I'm managing a team of 5 or 10, and I want to know what everyone's working on this week in their agenda? And so in this particular case, I go to here and I change to items I follow. And so now I get to see the agenda, but not just for my task, but for my coworkers' tasks as well. Anything that I'm a follower on, that I have access to. So when you think about prioritization, let's go back to the fundamental question in Matrix, which is, one, I need to know what I need to work on. And then two, what are the things that are urgent? And so when you look at Matrix, it's all around taking all this information across all these different projects and then surfacing them up and making sure that you know what you need to work on. Okay, so let's go back to this project here. And I have my personal priorities. I have this task that I created. And right now I put in quadrant 4, but I need to make sure that, we know that this is important. And so I'll go ahead and drag it to the top left. And you can see how by dragging it back and forth, I can make it very obvious to all my coworkers what the priorities are for every single task. And then one of the things I like to do is, as you add more tasks into a matrix, it gets a little overwhelming, right? There's a lot of things. And so you can actually resize your quadrants, and now you can go and focus on the task in quadrant 1 or focus on the task in quadrant 2. So that's one thing I encourage you to do, which is don't be scared to create a lot of projects. And then again, don't be scared to create tasks if they're relevant. All you have to do is sort of leverage Matrix and all these different views and resizing and so forth. So then you can focus on what really matters. Now let's talk about projects some more. And as I showed you here, I have a few dozen projects in my demo account. In my main work account, I have more than 300 projects. So what that means is that Matrix can handle hundreds of projects tens of thousands of tasks really easily. So it's really up to you how much you want to use Matrix. But what are the kind of projects that I typically see? First, there's something called a transient project. So let me give you an example. When you create a project in Matrix, perhaps it's a construction project and it's over the course of 18 months. What that means, it has a start date and end date. And therefore, your goal is to finish all the tasks, right? That's an example of a transient project. You might have something called a persistent project. And a persistent project is one that, sort of lasts forever. For us, for example, we have projects for each of our application, our Mac app, Windows app, web app. And the reality is we keep on adding more features and then more feature requests and all these things that we could do. And so that project continues and it never goes away. And then the third are recurring projects. And so let me give an example there. Let's just say if you have a customer onboarding process where you have an enterprise customer and you have 15 things you have to do. With Matrix, you can actually create projects that are recurring. So therefore, whenever you onboard a new customer, you can actually just launch from a template and then just choose when that customer starts, and Matrix will create all the tasks, all the priorities, all the due dates for you automatically. So those are the different types of projects that you can create. So let me show you how to put that into practice here. Simply click on projects and then choose create project. When you do, you can choose a blank project. And if I choose a blank project, very easy. I just choose the project name. I can actually associate with a user group. So you can think of a user group as a team or a department, or even, maybe you have 3 people that are always working together, a marketing person, a sales engineer, and then the salesperson or something like that, right? So you have these different user groups, and then you can associate a project with a user group. Then all those people in that user group will be able to access the project. Then you can choose a basic template. So these are actually just naming convention of Matrix. So the quadrants in Matrix are completely customizable. So what that means is you can customize the colors, you can customize the quadrant names, and so forth. So these are some other basic templates you can choose from. Then you can choose a color. The colors themselves actually don't affect the functionality, but I like to use the colors to differentiate between different categories of tasks. So for example, maybe you have sales related or customer related or marketing related or engineering related. And so that's how you would think about that. So very easy, and this creates a blank project for you. You can also go back and you can choose what's called public templates. So we've generated over 1,000 templates or so for you that you can use for free, and it's just different ways to customize Matrix to solve specific problems that you have. And so you can choose from public templates here. So for example, 30, 60, 90 day is just a way for managers to plan every single quarter that you have. But you can also create your own templates, and that's where you can go to My Templates and you can choose, for example, a client onboarding template. Then you can choose the start date, and Matrix will create that task, create all those tasks for you, replicate everything you have created in that template along with the appropriate due dates. You can also create using our AI system, where you simply type in a goal and Matrix will generate the task for you. And then lastly, you can use our import from CSV. So we actually have a really powerful way for you to export tasks as CSV and then import tasks as CSV. And it just helps you track all that information. And you can actually even run reports or build pivot tables, etc., on the data that you have in Matrix. So these are the different ways in which you can create tasks inside Matrix. So go ahead and, I'm sorry, projects in Matrix. So let me go back to one of the projects that we have here. So this particular project has a little bit more tasks in it. So you can see how it looks when there's a lot more action items. As you can see, some of these tasks actually have icons associated with it. And so if I select this task, I can actually go over here and change an icon. And the way it works with icon is just a visual. And so if you put icons on tasks, you can actually sort tasks by icons. And so that makes it a little bit easier to organize the information that you have, especially when you have a lot of tasks across a lot of projects. Then you can also star a task. And so as you can see, I can actually star this task. And when I do, it pops it to the top of the list. That makes it a lot easier for me to see what it is that's truly important. So my general advice is star no more than 3 to 5 tasks in any given projects, right? Because if you star a task, it goes to the top of the list. But again, if you star everything, then nothing is starred, right? So for me, I always star the task that I'm working on, the thing, in each project, these are the things that are really important for this project, and that's what I would star. So I recommend that you do the same thing. Now, I talk about the matrix a lot, but in reality, Priority Matrix is a very flexible way to prioritize your tasks and visualize your tasks in different ways. So I can go to the list view here, and guess what? I can see all my tasks in a nice long list. And then not only that, I can sort this. So sort of like an Excel sheet, I can sort by due dates, by modified dates, by percentage completion. But then one thing you'll notice is that the star tasks are always at the top. And that's the purpose of star tasks, right? It creates a very easy way to know where to focus your time and attention, no matter how many tasks you have. And then not only that, I can go to this view, go to multi-select up here, and then select all, and then generate an email report. And Matrix will actually build an Outlook, an email report here using Outlook. And as you can see, it opens up my Outlook. And then not only that, it actually builds a nice email report that I can use and send to my executive or send to my customers or anyone else who requires an update on this particular project. So this is a very unique feature in Matrix, and I recommend that people do it or use it as a way to communicate with other people. And so as you can see here within the list view, I can actually do a lot of other things too. I can actually click on filters, and then when I click on filters, I can do a couple of things. One, I can say, you know what, show me all the tasks that I finish. Okay. And then also, what are the tasks that I finish in specific quadrants? And then also the tasks that are assigned to specific people. Now, why do I need to do that? Well, let's just imagine if your manager goes to you and say, hey, by the way, what were all the things that we worked on for, you know, certain customer, X or whatever? Well, you go into the filter system inside Product Matrix, you can change the filter as needed, combine it with all these search information and so forth. And then when you do that, you select all the tasks, and then you go and you generate that email report, or you can export as a CSV. And Product Matrix will output that information for you, including all the information on when the task was created, when the task was completed, how much effort was spent on that task. So that's what makes this so powerful, is because as you use Matrix, not only do we track the quadrants and priorities and so forth, but all that extra information is there for you to review. And so when I say, how Matrix helps across the organization, this is organizational knowledge, right? You don't have to input this information by hand. You don't have to comb through your emails. You don't have to search through your to-do list and so forth. That information is visible and available to the team members. And so from a management standpoint, this is so valuable because you might have a coworker or an employee that leaves, and guess what? Everyone's confused. What did they work on? What were they supposed to work on? What are their remaining priorities? Well, Product Matrix can answer all of those questions. And then not only that, let's just say if I go back to this filter here, and then an employee is going on, leave of absence or something like that, I can go ahead and select the employee, right? And so here, for example, I'm going to go ahead and select the employee. These are the 3 tasks that's on his plate. I'm going to go ahead and select these 3 tasks, and then I can go ahead and assign this to another person. And so I can change the owner, and then I can assign all those 3 tasks to somebody else. And so you can see how powerful that is when it comes to reprioritization or redelegation. So that's the list view. And then the Kanban view is where you can actually see all the tasks that you have to do, what are the things in progress, and what are the things that are done. And what's actually really nice about this view is it's really good for those transient projects, because at the end of the day, you have to get everything from to do to done, right? And so let's just say a task is done. I simply drag it across here. And as you can see, it actually updates all my matrices. It updates on my list view as well. And I'm able to make progress on all of these tasks. And then, of course, in this view, I can also combine it with filters. So I can see what are the things to do assigned to a certain person or a keyword or a certain icon, etc. And then you have the calendar view. Anything that has due dates would show up on here. And then finally, you have what's called the Gantt chart view. And so Product Matrix automatically build Gantt charts for you where you don't have to manually do anything. All you're setting is due dates, and Product Matrix will build these timeline view. View is the following. The calendar is very good for seeing tasks that are due, today, this week, this month even. But the time, right? And so you can see how I can zoom out here and I can see what 3 months and 6 months and 12 months and so forth. So Matrix takes the same information that you have and again visualize in a different way. And then I can click on download here and I get an SVG file that I can put into my PowerPoint presentation. So again, the question is, wait, what about the tasks that are truly important? Well, guess what? You can always go to the filters, change it to quadrant 1, and now suddenly you have the Gantt chart for all the critical high priority tasks, right? And so that's how Matrix works. By actually making those decisions on prioritizing your task up front, you can see how we actually help you surface up everything else and make it possible for you to make those important decisions. Now, what happens if you use Matrix a lot and you have a lot of projects and you just got to figure out, okay, what do I need to work on? And I can't go and click through 30 projects because that's going to take me forever. Well, Matrix has these things called global views. And so on the left-hand side here, I can actually go to the search view, and this shows me all the tasks that I have across all of my projects. I simply click on start and it shows me all my star tasks. Click on my items and these are all the tasks that are assigned to me. And then again, I can click on this filters to find anything that I need to search by or filter by. And then I can also group by projects. And so suddenly I'm able to go to this view and I can see all the tasks that I have that are assigned to me across all of my projects. And then I can sort by due dates, I can sort by modified and so forth. And then not only that, again, I can generate my reports by doing select all and then generating the email reports or reassign tasks as needed. Similarly, what I can do is I can go to the Gantt chart view, and now the Gantt chart view shows me the Gantt charts, but not just for one project, but across all my projects. And so if you are an executive and you're managing a team of 300 people, there are just so many things that's happening, right? And again, you don't have time to go and drill down in every single project. Well, guess what? Matrix will give you that full visibility. And this is actually really valuable as a business owner as well. So if you're a business owner and you have a few hundred reports, and they're working on different things. And again, you don't want to bother people asking what it is they're working on. So when you go to the global Gantt chart here, you can see everything that you have access to and all the timeline over the next 1 year, 2 years, and so forth. So Matrix gives you that infinite flexibility. You can actually choose what projects to look at. You can also choose what filters as well. So what that means is you can actually build a Gantt chart, not just for a project, but also for a specific person. So it's a really powerful way to manage resource to exactly the quadrant 1 or quadrant 2 or quadrant 4 and so forth. And one really unique feature in Matrix is what's called the one-on-one view. So if you click on the one-on-one view, Matrix actually flips the whole thing around, and instead of actually browsing through projects and finding the tasks you have to work on, it lets you select a person, and Matrix will show you all the tasks you have in common with that person. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're a manager and you have 5 that you're always delegating tasks to. Then you have a one-on-one meeting with that person. So what do you want to discuss? Well, let's discuss all the things that is on that person's plate. You just go to the one-on-one view, generate this view and the report for you of all the tasks that you have in common with that person across all of Matrix. So instead of clicking on 30 different projects and discussing each, you go to the one-on-one view and Matrix generate that information. Now, not only that, during the meeting, you might come up with new things to do. You can click on add shared task, and you can automatically create tasks, organize into specific projects, use the natural language and so forth. When you create a task here, it assigns to the other person and automatically adds you as a follower. So that allows you to get updates on this task as progress is being made and so forth. And then not only that, I can actually redelegate tasks as needed. So one of the challenges that I personally face is that one, I need to know, okay, what is this person overwhelmed, right? Why are there so many overdue tasks? Do I need to reassign this to another person? Do we need to change the due dates? And from here, I can sort by due dates, and then I can select these tasks, again, using the multi-selective needed. And then I can select this task, and it opens on the right-hand side, and I can just change the due date really easily and rapidly. So it gives me complete clarity on what everyone's working on, all their priorities, all their due dates, without having to go and do this stuff manually. And so that's the power of the one-on-one view. Now I want to switch gear a little bit and talk about email management, which is a core feature in Protomatrix and probably the number one reason why customers come to Protomatrix. And so if you happen to use Outlook, Protomatrix is probably the best software to prioritize your emails. And in fact, we actually have so many cool features that we're coming out with and whole new product lines around email prioritization. So if your organization has a lot of emails, or you're dealing a lot of emails, triage, and so forth, we actually have some really cool products that's coming out. But that aside, what happens is if you get an email in Protomatrix, I'm sorry, in Outlook, you can go to the apps here, choose Protomatrix, and then choose prioritize email. So what happens is Protomatrix lets you convert an email into a task. And so you can see how on the right-hand side, I have this task capture panel. I can organize it into specific projects, and then I can go and change it to different quadrants here. And then I can even assign this email to another person, and then also set a due dates. So one of the challenges that we all face, or at least, I've seen so many customers face, is if you have an important email and you can't answer it right away, what do? You flag the email, right? Which is fine. But if you have 5 flag emails, that's okay. But if you have 50 flag emails, then what do? Now you're just dealing with a whole new complex mess of tasks, right? So with Matrix, you're not flagging an email. You're actually taking that email, you're prioritizing into specific projects, specific quadrants, assigning it to somebody, and then setting a due date. And so what this does is it actually creates a whole new layer of both transparency as well as accountability. Because if you just forward an email to a coworker, you're hoping that they see the email. You're hoping that that email is not lost in a whole sea of other emails. And then, they didn't just flag that emails and also forget it. And so instead here, what you're able to do is you're prioritizing, you're assigning, and you're setting a due date. And now it's very clear for them exactly when they need to do it and how important that email is. And so I just click capture email. And now on the right-hand side, it shows me a task item, just like I did inside Protomatrix. And then when I go back to Protomatrix, I can access this task. They see it on their agenda. They see it in their new assignment, displayed, so they know exactly that they've been assigned a new email and so forth. Now, if you happen to use Protomatrix for Outlook Web, there's a couple of other things you can do. Actually, let me show you something else, which is what if you get an email that you need to assign to an existing task? So Protomatrix is a very unique solution because I'm not aware of any other task management software that lets you do this, but you can actually open apps again, and instead of just prioritizing, you can open Protomatrix and you can attach an email to an existing task. And so what that allows you to do is you can just hover over the task and then click on attach. So the example use case here is if a customer follows up or if a customer sends a new email, but you've already created a task. So therefore, instead of actually creating another task inside Protomatrix, you can attach multiple emails into an existing task. So that's what you can do inside Protomatrix. And so if you also use Protomatrix Outlook for Web, you can actually access the entire Protomatrix software inside Outlook itself. You open a web app, you don't have to open our desktop app, you can have it inside Outlook. Now, if you use Microsoft Teams, the same thing happens. You can actually click on apps here, search for Protomatrix, you can pin it on the left-hand side, and as you can see, I can have Protomatrix on my left-hand side here. I have my entire Protomatrix application inside Teams, no context switching required. I don't have to open another tab, another app, or anything. And Protomatrix will work inside your Teams web app or your Team desktop app as needed. Now, if you happen to use Teams too, you can actually leverage a couple of other features. So Protomatrix is probably the most integrated software in the Microsoft ecosystem. And the way it works is that we just pretty much touch every feature that's available in Microsoft Teams. So let me give you an example. I can go to a chat here, and let's just say if I select a person, what I can do is I can go to this plus icon, choose Protomatrix, and add a one-on-one view. So I showed you how powerful the one-on-one view was. And what happens is actually I can add the one-on-one view as a tab with each of my coworker. So you see how here, instead of having to go to Matrix, select the one-on-one, select the person, I simply click on one-on-one. That person is pre-selected here. And now I can see all the tasks I have with that person inside Microsoft Teams, and I can add shared tasks as needed. So if you're a manager and you're, again, managing 5, 10, 20 people even, this is so much more powerful and easy to use compared to any task management software out there. Because again, we flip the model around to show you people first. But what's nice is that if you're in a chat with somebody already, right, you can actually hover over any conversation. So for example, let's say you and a coworker, you're already talking about different things, and suddenly you realize, wait a minute, we should convert that into a task. Well, guess what? Just hover over the conversation, click Create PM Item, and Matrix will let you convert any conversation into a task, and you can organize that as needed. And then not only that, down here in the chat, you can actually click on this plus, and then again, click on Matrix, and then you can actually attach a task from Matrix as an action card into the conversation with them in Microsoft Teams. And then also you can actually install the Matrix chatbot. And so when you have the chatbot, Matrix will send you notifications of the tasks that you work on or new delegation that you have, but also you can converse with the Matrix chatbot to tell you exactly what you need to work on, what are the tasks that you have overdue, and so forth. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because I wanted to show you that Matrix is pretty much there no matter how you use Microsoft Teams or how you use Outlook, etc. So we want to be omnipresent because that helps you figure out what you need to work on at any point in time. So if you happen to use Microsoft Teams or Outlook, make sure that you install our application. Now, there's so much more I can show you inside Teams, but those are features that you can learn over time, and you would use only the features that's needed for you to be productive. You don't have to use every feature in Matrix. Focus on what really is helpful to you at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to Matrix here. I'm going to go through a few more things because I think, there's sort of edge cases in Matrix that might be helpful to you. Now, if you look at my left-hand side here, you can see this little lock icon. Well, guess what? Inside Matrix, you can actually invite people, team members to a project. But let's say you have a sensitive project, and a sensitive project is where you don't want someone else to accidentally invite a person or assign a task to a person that shouldn't be in it. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're in HR. You need to have a conversation with somebody, but you want to make sure that that task doesn't accidentally leak. And so all you have to do is right click on here and then choose restrict project. And when you restrict a project, it has this lock icon, and this lock icon ensures that the owner of the project or an admin of the project has full responsibility or full accountability of who exactly can be delegated. So it's a very powerful feature to manage your more private projects. But when you select a project on the right-hand side, you can actually do a couple of other things. As you can see here, you can have the user group, you can invite members, right? So you can actually select which members to add to this particular project. And then also you can customize the quadrant names as well as the quadrant colors. So this is something that's a little bit more advanced, and I recommend that you do it if you have specific processes at your organization that you want to follow, or if you want to use the four quadrant terminology methodology in a different way. Whether or not you use the high priority and urgency, or important and urgency, etc., or high effort, or low effort, high impact, etc. Those are just different ways of just organizing information, right? And so Matrix gives you that flexibility as needed. So that's a useful feature. Now, when you select a project on the top right here, you actually have a lot of options. So this is something that you can play with depending on your use case, but you can export the project as a CSV. You can import this CSV into this project, or you can save this project as a template. And this is what I showed you earlier, how you can actually build template systems completely inside Matrix. And then when you do that, Matrix, when you launch a project from a template, it copies all the tasks, resets the start dates, so then you can know you don't have to re-enter tasks over and over again. So these are the things you can do. Now, as you add more tasks to more projects to Protomatrix, you can actually build dashboard projects. So this is actually a really neat feature. So I'll show you, for example, let's just say if you have a project or a task, right? So actually, here's an example. Read a business book every month. Now, guess what? What if I want to actually create a project in Protomatrix to track all the business books I could read? I simply right-click on this, and then I choose Convert to Project. And now what happens is that Protomatrix will go and create a whole project for me that's linked to my dashboard project. So now you can see how when I go back to this project right here, that task has a special link here. And if I click on that, it takes me to a whole new project. And so Protomatrix gives you this flexibility around building sort of like cascades of projects. And then not only that, when you do something like that, it actually will inherit the information from the dates. And so now you can have a Gantt chart that is essentially an overview of all the sub projects as well. Very advanced use case, and not something that I recommend from day one. But if you continue to use Protomatrix and you're using it across the whole organization, this is where it adds a lot of value. Now, let me go back to a task, and I'm going to explain a few more important concepts. If you go to the resources section, this is where you upload those files and documents. So you see how here it says EML file? This was a task that was created from an email. And so when I assign this to somebody, they can click on this and open the actual email and respond to it. But I can also upload additional documents. I can link existing items. I can link to URLs. And in fact, I can even use our Chrome and Edge extension to capture any link or any website or any documents on SharePoint or whatever and convert that into a task as well. So Protomatrix gives me this flexibility to attach multiple resources into a single task. But at the same time, I can also link an existing item, and then I can say that these tasks are dependent on each other. So I can say, a certain task is blocked by another task, or blocks, or is caused by, or causes. And if you happen to choose that, Protomatrix will update those Gantt charts to build the dependencies for you. Okay, with that, I'm going to start wrapping up, and let me recap the things that are truly important that I want you to take away. The first is don't be afraid to create projects. As I mentioned here, there are many different types of projects, right? Create a project for each set of priorities that you need to capture. Second, when you create tasks, make sure that you are prioritizing them. And putting things into different quadrants is actually very helpful for you to actually gain clarity on what it is you need to work on. Your important tasks should always have due dates and should always have reminders. I think that's very, very important because it helps you remember to work on those tasks. And it also helps you overcome all these other urgent tasks that's requiring your attention, right? And then when you use Protomatrix, make sure you look at these alerts here. This is where, if you get a new assignment, this will pop up. So guess what? Just go click on this and see exactly what's been assigned to you. So similarly, if you need to train your coworkers on how to use Protomatrix, just train them on this. Tell them that focus on their agenda and then also the new assignments, or if someone mentions them, etc., that's where they need to focus their time. Okay, so that's what you should be doing every day. And then when you create projects in Protomatrix, and if you manage a team, I strongly recommend creating a project called Weekly Staff Meeting. And this is the project that you share on the screen with other people. And what happens is that when you have this and everyone's in the meeting, everyone's having a conversation, and you're talking about all the things that you're working on and so forth, guess what? You focus on the things that's in quadrant 1 and then quadrant 2. You don't talk about things in quadrant 3, right? Just because someone wants to bring something up because it's top of mind doesn't mean you should spend all your time talking about it. Instead, make sure that you cover those high priority tasks. Then, when everyone go back to their desk, guess what? Do they open up their weekly staff meeting project and everyone's on the same page? And then not only that, you can continue the conversation around important tasks in the chat section of that task. And so as you can see, suddenly your staff meeting isn't just one, something that happens at one time anymore. Instead, it's a living document that makes it very easy for people to be aligned and know exactly what they need to work on. So I strongly recommend creating a weekly staff meeting for that purpose. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump back to the presentation here. A couple of tips to shortcut your success. As we talked about here, if you're a manager, create a project for your staff meeting and screen share during the meeting. Very, very easy. Update it so everyone can go back to their desk and be on the same page. If you manage multiple sites, have a project, Matrix project for each site location, and then that dashboard project to oversee them all. If you have a lot of specific training program or initiative, that's when you create those templates that I talked about. If you're a business owner, create a project for each of your departments. And then also you can lock those projects, restrict those projects. So then you have full control on who can see like your strategies or important goals, etc. If you're an individual contributor, create a project for your goals to use to track your promotion request. I bring that up because I think at the end of the day, your success is the most important aspect of all of this, right? You can use Product Matrix for so many different things, but I think one thing that's really nice is you can go to that search view, create a report of all the work you've done for the past quarter, and paste it into your workload management software. And so you're able to generate that report of your work and prove that you've done all these things as a way to get a promotion. So what to do now, if you happen to use Teams and Outlook, make sure you install Matrix in those software application. If you download the desktop apps, I like that because it actually sends you notifications. So for example, a task is due or you were assigned something, you'll get a notification in our Mac and desktop and Windows app. And then make sure they create a project to highlight your top priorities. Make sure you set up those due dates and reminders. Ask your colleagues to do the same. And then the last two things here, one, spend 1 hour each week at the beginning or the end of each week dedicated to reviewing your priorities. The reason I make this so explicit is because we spend so much time working on things, we spend so little time thinking about what we should work on. So I hope that that's at least one thing you'll change after today's webinar. And then lastly, make sure you sit down and compare Matrix every single week with coworkers, especially if you're a manager. You make sure you talk to your direct reports, and if if you're just managing your personal tasks, make sure you share that with your managers so they are aware on the things that you're working on. And one strategy I want to give you, if someone asks you to do something and they're like, hey, this is very important and urgent, we got to get this done, show them your part of matrix and say, sure, I can work on that. What should I take off from quadrant one? Right? And if you do that, then suddenly everyone else will realize, wait a minute, if I put everything as important and urgent, then something else will have to drop. And so I think that's what makes Part Matrix such a successful communication tool, because it's a way for you to defend yourself. But also, if you're a manager, you're also ensuring that you're not overloading your direct reports with all these things that's important and urgent. So I hope that you keep that in mind as you use our software. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And then also, you're welcome to email me, hi@affluence.com. And I want to hear your feedback. I want to hear anything that's positive, negative around both the webinar as well as the software itself. We're constantly improving the system. And as I mentioned, we're launching multiple new products around email management in particular. So we want to hear from you on your challenges and so forth. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I'll take a look at the chat now to see if there's any questions. Okay, I see a question here on how to change the color of the icon, and as well as the quadrants. So I'll go ahead and open up here. What happens is if you go to a task and you click on this icon right here, that's how you change the icon. So these are sort of the icons that you have. So these are the options that we give you here. And actually, I didn't tell you this, but these are some icons that I've seen a lot of success with: red, yellow, and green. Pretty much saying this is on schedule, behind schedule, etc. So that's something that you can use. Then for a project, if you go to a project, you can actually go to the project details, and then you can select the quadrant and then change the color of the quadrant right here. So you can see that you can actually customize this as well on a per project basis. So there's a question around how to create projects and so forth. If you use our application for the very first time, there should be a basic tutorial, and it walks you through how to create projects. But if you have any questions there, feel free to reach out to us. We don't have like a really small version of the webinar that focuses on the basics, but we do have our help page, which is where you can learn the basics of Protomatrix. And then I see a question on team members icon. Oh, okay. So what happens is this: if you go to a task and you click on the letter here, that's where you can assign to another person. So that's how you assign. But if you want to change your avatar, you can actually go to Protomatrix account management page, and then you change avatar. And this is where you can go and upload a picture. So as an example, once you have 30 or 40 people, you might want to put your picture instead of just the first letter of your name, because they'll start overlapping. So that's where you click and change the picture. My email is hi@affluence.com here. And then for pricing, you can always go to our website. We just go, everything is completely transparent. And also, Protomatrix has a free tier. You can use Protomatrix, 100 tasks, 5 projects, 250 total items, up to 5 collaborators, and that's free. There's a recording, and so I'll share the recording with you afterwards, but you can also see all our other recordings here. So that's also in the webinar. So if you go to webinars, list, you can actually see our previous recordings. We also have recordings on other features as well, such as the workload reports and so forth. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask there. Fantastic. These are great questions. Is there anything that I missed? And so if I did miss anything, feel free to send me an email, hi@affluence.com. Again, I really want your feedback, because, for us, we're constantly trying to improve the product. We're actually adding, again, I'm super excited about some of the new features and new products that we're launching around email prioritization and triage. So feel free to reach out to us. Thank you. Appreciate the feedback. I'm really happy to hear that this was helpful. Unfortunately, we don't have any discount. Our pricing is exactly very transparent on the website, so you can go and take a look at our pro pricing there. Is it possible to change a star task? So I'm not sure what you mean by that, but if you go and you have a task that's starred, you simply click on the star again to unstar it. So that's pretty much it. So very easy to start and unstar. And actually, I didn't explain this, but Protomatrix is a very powerful tag system. And so as you can see, when I star it down here, it tags it, but you can also add hashtag to any item. And then later on, if you go back to the search view, you can generate reports on those hashtags. So star is just happens to be a special hashtag. But if you're really looking for an advanced usage of Protomatrix, that's what the hashtag is for. Great question. Thank you very much. I appreciate the feedback. I'm so glad that this was helpful. Cheers. Bye-bye.